It's time for EdTech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.
In our previous episode, we explored the education priorities of the Federal Ministry of Education and the Universal Basic Education Commission. We also had conversations about provisions within the Federal Ministry of Education and the Universal Basic Education Commission for enabling digital learning across schools in Nigeria. Today, we take this conversation a step further by asking an equally important question. How critical are public-private partnerships to addressing these priorities and scaling EdTech adoption? Public financing alone cannot close Nigeria's digital learning gap. While funding vehicles such as the Universal Service Provision Fund, USPF, and the Universal Basic Education Matching Grants exist, infrastructure deficits, teacher capacity needs, device access challenges, and last-mile connectivity gaps require more than just government allocation alone. They require partnerships. Public-private partnerships have increasingly shaped Nigeria's education and connectivity landscape. These partnerships take different forms, such as telecom-backed school connectivity projects, CSR-funded digital laboratories, NGO government blended deployment models, and even EdTech startup integration into public classrooms. Today's episode focuses on understanding how public-private partnerships are structured, what makes them succeed or fail, and how they can be designed to truly scale EdTech adoption across Nigeria. By the end of this conversation, we aim to understand the policy and financing conditions required for effective public-private partnerships, identifying what gaps still exist and what intervention approaches can be leveraged, and exploring how risk and accountability should be distributed for sustainable, widespread adoption of EdTech. I still have my guests from last week's conversation in the studio with me today. Please make welcome again Dr. Awesome, Director, Teacher Professional Development, Universal Basic Education, UBEC, Dr. Adetola Salao, Special Advisor to the Honorable Minister of Education on STEM and Corporate Engagement, Daniel Aduku, Program Director, Coderina EdTech Foundation. You're all welcome again to this show. EdTech Mondays Nigeria is a platform for facilitating critical conversations around technology for teaching and learning. My name is Nisi Madu, Managing Partner at CC Hub, and I'll be your host for today as we continue our match series, Powering Learning Everywhere, Partnerships that Scale EdTech Adoption. Before we continue the conversation, are you an EdTech innovator or founder designing inclusive education technology solutions? Applications for Cohort 4 of the MasterCard Foundation EdTech Fellowship are now open. If you're building solutions for learners living with disabilities, forcibly displaced persons, or learners in rural communities, solutions focused on young girls and women, and solutions focused on education and skills data, this is a great opportunity. Selected startups would receive product development support, market access, and equity-free funding. If this aligns with a solution that you're building or someone you know, please visit futureoflearning.cchub.africa to apply or learn about the fellowship. Now, let's go back to the conversation. And just back to you, Dr. Salawa and Dr. Awesome, and we had started this earlier where we talked about partnerships. So you've highlighted the provisions from the Federal Ministry of Education, from UBEC, for powering digital learning across the country. You've also talked about how you set priorities. Now you set the priorities, you have your interventions, but you need partnerships to make this happen. And so perhaps you can share a bit with us, how do partnerships work? What sort of policy clarity or regulatory frameworks guide public-private partnerships from a Federal Ministry of Education angle, but then also from a UBEC angle as well? Dr. Salau?
I love that question. It leads into one of the big focus areas for my office. My office is STEM education and corporate sector engagement. So one of the big mandates I have with my office is working with organizations to create alliances, synergy, where public brings its own core capabilities, and the private brings its own core capabilities, and we're able to work together in strategic alignment to solve our challenging, I prefer to call them challenging, to solve our challenging issues. And you asked a very, in fact, sorry, not asked, you brought up a very, very big thing, which was how do we have a framework in which this engagement takes place? We're going to be having a really, really big program around that. For the last 7 to 8 months, we've been having discussions on how do PPP models work, where they're accountable, they are transparent, engaging, and of course, it is written and follows a clear-cut framework. So we've been having discussions around that. We put together guidelines, a series of guidelines. The Honorable Minister drove this. It's something he's very passionate about. We have this series of guidelines. So sometime in Q2, you're going to hear a lot of fanfare around us unveiling and letting the public hear about how this engagement, how these partnerships between these two keys are going to take place within that framework. I love it because no more guesswork. All you have to do now will be reach out to that document and say, okay, if I want to do, I'm just giving an example, I want to do this kind of intervention. These are the kind of things that I have to do. I have to follow these steps. I have to go engage so departments. These are the kind of documentation I have. It's good. It helps everybody. Everybody knows this is where I'm working with, and that's where I'm working with. I love structures, and I know you guys also love structures. I tell people one of the things that I really enjoyed about working when I was in Lagos State was that a lot of systems and structures were put in place and they were constantly being refined. I believe that now that the Honorable Minister is also trying to put that in place here at the federal level, really, really going to be a major, major bonus to organizations saying, I want to help. How can I help? How can I engage? Because right now, a lot of people are afraid. They keep on hearing all these negative stories and they want to be involved. They want to help, but they're kind of scared. But once they see that there's a framework, there are guidelines, a lot of that fear will leave, confidence will return. And I see that it's going to help us to address a lot of the funding gaps. And when I say funding, I'm not just talking money necessarily. A lot of the gaps are resource driven. Now, when I say resource, it could be somebody saying, you know what, like what I mentioned about the mentorship of girls, say, you know what, I want to give my resource of time. I'm going to come in, I'm going to work with the guidelines that we've now delineated in that framework and contribute my own quota to mentoring these girls. So I'm really excited about it. I'm sure you can see how I'm vibrating. I'm very, very excited about how we're going to be having that engagement with the public and telling them this is the framework. So it will really help partnerships. And I'm sure now that we're having this conversation and people are hearing about this, when we start making this announcement, I'm sure we're going to have a good turnout and people saying, okay, now that you've told us this, let's start talking about coming to come and help this wonderful sector that impacts all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Salau. And you've raised a very important point. I know over the years in our work in education and EdTech, we've interacted with a number of stakeholders. I remember a particular commissioner of education saying to me, a lot of times when we have either NGOs or private sector partners, they come with their own things, different things, and we're struggling. How does it align to our own agenda? And essentially, this structure that you've designed or described and this framework you've talked about is harmonizing that so that we're clear on what we're trying to achieve, and is essentially all hands on deck and mobilizing all of the resources that we have to be able to achieve that. Dr. Awesome, from your perspective at UBEC, what are some of these frameworks around partnerships, including as well, you talked about monitoring, right, and quality assurance of some of these interventions, which is also critical.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Adetola, for the insight already provided on this. I should say that if you are very close to the workings of the Federal Ministry of Education and that of the agencies that are driving most of the interventions, you realize that there are a whole lot of frameworks. And it's not to say it's a multiplicity of frameworks, but to identify that these are precise guides for each of the core mandates that the ministry and the agencies are given responsibility for. I should say, for instance, for UBEC, you have a framework on how to access the fund. If you come to teacher professional development, you have a framework for teacher professional development. If you go to each of these other components of what UBEC does, you'll find clear guidelines on what is supposed to be done. And these are there to provide that kind of strategic guide so that beyond having the fund and the resource that is required to drive any of the components, there's a clear course of action to be followed. Stakeholders are aware of this, the implementers are aware of this, and then the recipients of these services are also aware of what they should expect in terms of added value. So that's how it works. So in the real sense of it, whatever is done within this platform is public-private partnerships. Sometimes it could be public-public because, for instance, there are activities that UBEC is going to do in collaboration with the NTI. So it's one public agency collaborating with another public agency. There are interventions between UBEC and the National Commission for Mass Literacy and all that. So that's how it works. Yet again, it's a matter of partnerships. And for EdTech, you come to note that, for instance, there is the partnership for the development of digital content or the provision of digital content. There is the partnership for connectivity. Now, the FME and UBEC are discussing with internet service providers for zero-rated data. And then there is the partnership with civil society actors for tracking. There's a partnership with development partners for the provision of technical assistance, especially in areas where the capacity is low. And then there's also the partnership for innovations within the ecosystem. Most of the things that CC Hub is doing is also within this platform. So these are clear opportunities for both public and non-state actors to bring their expertise into what happens within basic education for the sole purpose of ensuring that EdTech innovations are not only introduced but sustained, and all of them align with the overarching goal of ensuring that our students or pupils are learning within the classrooms and there is sufficient improved quality of learning outcomes all over the place. This is what I would like to say in response to your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Some very, very important things you've highlighted there. And I'm sure that our audience listening are probably very excited and will be looking out for how they can be part of this, whether it's EdTech innovators who have digital learning content that can take advantage of some of these partnership areas that you've mentioned, or Dr. Salau, other corporate organizations or non-state actors who are also looking forward to hearing a lot more about the structure that you've talked about to be able to engage to drive this vision of ensuring that learning happens everywhere. And Daniel, I'm going to come to you at this point. You know, from your perspective and engaging or being part of the USPF Impact Alliance, we know that this is a government agency. This is, you know, infrastructure that this government agency has provided in schools across the country. And, you know, they were calling for partners to engage with them through the Impact Alliance. What were the key things that stood out or that motivated Coderina to say, look, we want to be a part of this, and, you know, here's how we're going to be a part of it? What were some of those things?
All right. So when USPF reached out, one of the key things that stood out for us was the fact that they were targeting underserved areas, which has always been our passion, because those are the people that are normally neglected. So when USPF came on board and, we want to reach out people that normally we can't reach. So this is where we saw a chance to fill in that gap. And then in the meeting, everything that was said actually aligns with what we wanted to do. The only difference in the meeting was instead of going after the normal regular schools, we wanted to go after the special needs, because we know that to us those are like the most neglected, because most initiatives don't go, they go there but not enough. So we wanted to, so and USPF was willing to give us that access, and we also found that they've already made some initial move and step, taking some step actually by providing internet, computers and all those, so which is going to really make our engagement with them very seamless. So looking at USPF giving us access and also the steps they've taken already to ensure that we going in there is going to be seamless for us actually gave us the motivation we needed to engage these schools. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And just my last question to Dr. Salau and Dr. Awesome, before I ask my last question to you, Daniel, would be, we've talked, about the provisions, we've talked about priorities, we've talked about frameworks and areas where partners can come on board or enabling partnership. And the last thing is this: partners come on board, that's great, but it's important that we have sustainable partnerships if indeed we're going to be able to, achieve the vision and the goal that we have. And so from your perspective, what are key things that are required for these sustainable partnerships? What would you say needs to be in place, both from the government side, but even on the partner side as well, whether it's a perspective to the engagement, whether it's provisions, whatever it is that you think are important for sustainable partnership, especially also the role of performance. So it's not enough to partner with government and it's just business as usual, or not paying attention to the quality of expertise being provided in that partnership. So perhaps you can just shed more light on what critical elements are required for sustainable partnerships to ensure that education thrives in Nigeria. Dr. Salau?
It will come down to what I said earlier. I said something about everybody working from their own core capabilities. That's very important. And then also, you just mentioned something, and that's something too that's very key, making sure that the outcomes are measurable. And then also driving alignment around evidence. One of the key things, I'm sure it comes back to my own background, but one of the key things that's really, really big for me is utilizing evidence when you are driving work, so that way you can say, you know what, I've been able to prove this. Now that I've proven this with 100 schools, what do I need to do to prove this for maybe 200 schools or 500 schools? So having evidence, having data. And then another thing that I'm seeing from my own experience, and I know that's one of the things that we're focusing on, this framework that I mentioned around the PPP guidelines, is co-ownership. We don't want a situation where we're just constantly asking, bring. We need them to co-author, to be a huge part of, this is what we're doing and this is how we're doing it. They need to own how we're going to deliver this and how is it going to be done and how we're going to continue, like you're saying, to make it something that will continue over and over and over. So when we're asking these partners to say, look, you're going to be part of it, you're sitting down at this table, not just to give, but you're helping to actually sit down to drive what are the rules, how we engage in, how is this going to be structured. Immediately, something shifts with everybody that is at that table, that we're all owners of this. Very, very important that this is done right. And that brings to the table talking about accountability, because that's one of the biggest things in being able to make sure that we're able to continue to do this program. Is a lot of times you hear, oh, I don't know, I think it's them, or I think it's them. But everybody knows these are the rules. This is exactly where the buck lies with me. I sat down at that table, I designed that. It changes everything. And those are the kind of things we're going to be stressing over and over when we're talking about partnerships moving forward. So that's really, really key. And one of the things we're now doing is aligning our private sector capability in different areas that are priority needs for us. So that way, when they're engaging with us, we're saying, okay, these are the areas that we've marked as really, really key, coming to come and engage with us, this on that. that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Salawa. And you mentioned very important things. Of course, there's the element of making sure impacts are measurable, but there's also a mindset and a perception, which is co-ownership as well, that this is not just a government agenda that we're helping with, but we're also, this is also important for us, and we look at it as co-owners of this vision, essentially in driving that, and that's very important. Thank you very much. Dr. Awesome, over to you, sir.
Thank you again for the input made by Dr. Salao. Yes, so for us at UBEC, the first thing is to understand that education is a social service. That's so to say, this is a society service. And come to think of the fact that it's not just one element of society that can provide a social service. So that understanding is key. No institution can do it alone, whether it's just a rudimentary provision of education or issues around EdTech, innovation, and all that. Not one single institution can do it alone. And UBEC understands this so well to the extent that it's now instituting a paradigm for shared commitment and co-creation of anything that has to do with basic education. If that shared commitment is not there, you're going to have schools and no student. You're going to have schools and no parent is willing to send his or it's okay. They'll say, okay, oh, it's their own school, so let them have the school. Or it's their own process, let them run it. So what UBEC does is to ensure that there is collaboration and partnership, looking up first to the higher levels of the Federal Ministry of Education, and then partnering along the sides with the suburbs and with the sister agencies, and then lower down to the suburbs, to the LGAs, co-creation, co-ownership. And what UBEC also does is to be sure that it does its interventions one step at a time. That's why you hear us talk about pilot every time. What's the essence? Is to come up with something that is truly innovative, establish a model, and celebrate the success, and then ask the states who own this process to scale it and have better evidence. So what UBEC does is it models what the states, like I said, we have a model smart school in each of the states. We have 7 regional special models in 6 states across the country. And this is what UBEC expects that states buy into and implement for the betterment of basic education provisions within their domains. I should say, for instance, that UBEC had established this UBEC scale up long ago, which currently now the FME is trying to improve with the revamp that Dr. Slough spoke about earlier. One of the key initiatives at the National Teachers Summit that was held earlier in the year. And it was basically like a pilot in 7 states, in 6 states rather. And that pilot produced over 7,000 teachers that completed at least one course on that platform that has 243 courses with 329 TRCN credit units allocated to it, and involves state and non-state school teachers who logged onto that and learned or went through the continuous professional development practices there. And of course, just to add a cap on it, with a little stipend provided for it. Why is this so? Because just something has to happen. We are used to our public, our stakeholders waiting for the federal government to do something. You know too well that if you go to a class or you go to a school, you'll find out that one part of the door, the hinge is out. The hinges is out. They'll be waiting for one big government to come from somewhere to do it. But now, working in partnership with the school-based management committees, the partnership is strengthened. Now everyone is coming to terms with the fact that sustainability will happen when everyone is involved. And this goes back to the earlier thought which I expressed, that technology itself may not transform education, but structured financing, accountable systems, trained quality teachers, and data-driven processes added to sustained partnerships is what will completely transform our education service provision and make us what we need to be in terms of quality education service delivery. This is key to whatever we want to do going forward in innovation, in educational technology. And I'm glad that the FM is driving this process so seriously. UBEC Executive Secretary Dr. Aisha Garba is pulling these strings so strongly, and with the partnerships that we have from development partners to agencies that are related in service provision and to NGOs and special teams like CC Hub, we're sure that we have greater potential ahead of us as a country.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awesome. I think you've left us with very, very important words there, that education is a social service, which means that not only one party can render this service. Every single member of the society needs to play their role in ensuring that we're able to deliver, this quality service. And you've highlighted the key elements for sustained partnership. And we'll just be wrapping up with you, Daniel. You've had this partnership with USPF. What would you say are key things? I'm sure there are other organizations such as Coderina out there who also want to take advantage of a lot of the opportunities for partnerships that Dr. Salawa and Dr. Awesome have shared here today. What would be your advice to them? What are key things that they would need to note when they're looking to go from your perspective as a private organization, that they would need to note when going into, wanting to take advantage of this type of government partnerships?
All right, so to every other organization that would like to get this kind of partnership, so one of the key things is that your goal must align with the state and national educational priorities as well. So you must be bringing what they also want to offer. And then also you should be able to look at it as something that's sustainable, not a one-time thingy. So because I'm sure these the public partners are willing to sustain it, so they need organizations that are also willing to go the extra mile, and that is where USPF stood out for us. They didn't just pilot it and left us all alone. They were in every of the phase until the very end, coming for updates, even following us to the first pilot stage and all that. So to every organization that wants to have a partnership like that, first, like I said, your priorities must align. So, and then as well, you must be willing to go the extra mile to ensure that there's sustainability and then there's ownership. So you don't jump around from one project to the other until you're sure that you have equipped the current one with enough capacity to continue the program even when you're not there anymore. For example, the places we have wrapped up our pilot program with, we didn't leave them. We provide virtual support, and whenever they need us, we're still willing to go back to them to offer support and all that. Now we're also looking at integrating them and onboarding them on some of our programs as well, if they're interested. And I think another thing they should be looking at is that we believe that learning is not complete until it's transformed into solutions. So once you equip the teachers, the students with these skills, then if you're looking at how to ensure that they use those skills to create solutions. And for us, we come up with programs to ensure they come and showcase the skills they've gained from this training. A good one is we just recently completed our National Robotics Championship that brought schools from across Nigeria to the nation's capital in Abuja to showcase all their skills in STEM, education, technology and all that. So I think I would just say you should be looking at the bigger picture. Don't just see it as a one-time thing. You should look at how it's going to be progressive, sustainable, and how to ensure that the learners as well on the long run can come out to showcase something you have delivered to them and not just let the program die immediately you leave them. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It is about ensuring visions align, looking at the bigger picture and ensuring that the impact is measurable. Thank you so much, Dr. Salau. Thank you, Dr. Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel, for your time on this show today. We really do appreciate it. As we conclude today's episode, one key takeaway is that partnerships are critical for driving widespread adoption of EdTech at scale. However, These partnerships would require a co-ownership mindset and alignment with the vision and objectives of national and regional education priorities. We'll leave you with this today. What does a truly scalable and sustainable EdTech partnership look like in Nigeria? Is it shared financing, shared data, shared accountability, or shared risk? What partnership model do you believe Nigeria needs most to power learning everywhere? Share your thoughts with us in the comments on social media or through our direct message channels via SMS or WhatsApp at 0703 165 0809 or call 0706 402 0742. Remember, you can continue this discussion on our WhatsApp and Telegram channels, EdTech Mondays Nigeria. Past episodes are available on Spotify, EdTech Mondays Nigeria, and YouTube CC Hub Africa. Join us next week as we continue exploring how partnerships can move from promise to systemic impact.
Tech Mondays, brought to you by MasterCard Foundation and CC Hub.